Good morning, everybody, and welcome back. Or if you're new here, welcome to another edition of Kingly Conversations, man. And hey, we got a hot one for you today. Hey, but before we get into all of that, you know what time it is. As always, Zoe's got a shout out.
What up, everybody? Good morning. There is snow outside, and it's actually sticking. We are in Virginia and the 757 area, and it looks snowy out there. I hope everybody out there is enjoying it. That's all I got, and be safe out there, guys.
Hey, listen. So this week we're gonna be talking about logic, critical thinking, and fallacies. So if you don't know what that is, hey, strap in. Let the Kings talk about it. All right, good people. Hey, welcome back to another edition of Kingly Conversations, man. And as I am every single week, you know who it is. It's Alan.
Yo, what up? It's your boy Twine, aka Twin. Ask me about my podcast. You know what time it is. Let's
Marsha Dope.
go.
Is referring your mentor Calvin D. Hill.
All right.
I'm gonna just say this
So,
first before we get started, fellas.
all
Man,
right.
we gonna jump into it. How y'all doing? All right, man.
Oh, yeah,
Happy
yeah.
New
Good.
Year!
Happy.
Happy
All that.
New Year! Wow,
Happy.
wow, wow,
Bam,
wow.
bam, bam, bam. Hopefully everybody had a good New Year coming in, nice and safe one. You know what I mean? Other than that, I'm tired, man. How y'all feeling? Y'all good? Y'all got energy?
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
good.
all right. Cup of Joe.
I'm good. I'm ready to
Yeah.
work all day. I'm ready to
All right.
work.
I got a cup of no. So let's.
A cup of no.
I figure if I'm, when the day is almost over and Master got me working, I can do certainly work for myself today. I got a lot of stuff I need to do. I need to work on a lot of stuff. It's including like
Gotcha.
those 30 clips I was talking about for Kingly Conversations that's got to get posted because TikTok coming down in like 10 more days. So
That's what they say. Y'all about to get
we
it in
see,
while you can.
we see.
He said
Well,
it's
I mean,
going down. It's official.
it was
Was it the
official last
20th?
year,
Oh,
but the 19th is the date
19th. Okay.
they supposed to remove it from all the app stores if it's not sold to an American company, which sell it to me. Sell it to me for $1. I'll let you keep running, and I won't do nothing. We just make it on paper.
Mm, yeah, right.
Um, then,
That's
but that's not what we're here to
ridiculous.
talk about anyway. But then you just won't get updates. So if you already have the app, you'll still be able to use the app, but you won't be able to update it because it won't be in the app store.
Mm,
So over time, it'll just get worse and worse until it's unusable. Because bugs and such. But anyway,
Mm.
to that end, we talk about logic, critical thinking, and fallacies. And the reason I wanted to kind of talk about it is because I don't think people understand. Well, I don't think people understand a lot of stuff. So
mm,
I wanted to at least talk about why I think so many people have a hard time thinking critically and logically about issues. Um, so you know, but for the listeners, the definition of definition we are using for logic is just the process of evaluating information and arguments using established rules of reasoning that are valid and reach sound conclusions, right? The problem that I always have though is, as I said a few minutes ago when we were just having a conversation, is every man is right in their own mind. And so
bless
since
them up.
everybody's right, oh, thank you. Since everybody's right in their own mind, they feel like whatever conclusion they come to has got to be the right one. And nothing could be further from the truth. So that's the premise we're starting with. Um, so that's where we at right now, anyway.
All right, you gotta give me an example
Of what?
of how people don't use critical thinking. Use that one first.
Okay.
Let's go. Let's look
Well,
at
let's
because
use this one. All right.
logic first.
Here
Do
we
logic first, and
here
then
we
we'll do
go.
critical thinking because
Here
that
we
happens a
go.
lot in the work we
Well,
do.
Here
they
we
all go
go.
together. They all go together.
Well,
You can't really have one without the other.
hmm.
Um, I mean, you can
All
try to
right.
have one without the other, but you can't in reality have one without the other. So, like for an example, I will use this one because it is something that most people at least have heard of or deal with. But we'll talk about the flat earth.
What
Now,
about it?
so as a matter of fact, we'll use that this entire process. So we'll talk about the flat earth. So here's what I find with a lot of people who believe that the earth is flat. They only believe that the earth is flat from their own lived experience. And because they're making an assumption that quote unquote the government is lying to you.
Hmm.
And I say from their own experience because listen, if you're on the ground, to you the earth is always flat. And if you're not in a field like engineering, like structural engineering, that requires you to deal with the mathematics of what the earth is actually shaped like, you like if you build a bridge and that bridge is more than a mile long, you're going to have to deal with the mathematics of what the earth is shaped like. You're going to have to. But if you're not in a field that has to deal with it, then to you, the earth may as well be flat. Whether it is or it isn't doesn't really matter because from your vantage point, it is always flat. But that does not mean that that is flat. So just because we see a thing one way does not mean that it's true objectively. It just means that from our perspective, this is what I see. So I believe this is true, and that's not always the case. So that's what I mean when I say when I talk about logic and critical thinking. It's like we should be able to look at the data, and if we in our own minds have been wrong, we should have at least the flexibility to change our mind. But I find that most people lack the flexibility to change their mind about anything. It's just like in our community, I hadn't heard it till I was in my 30s. Never. Um, that we don't use the word picnic because of its origins. Even though if you go and find the origins, the premise that somebody's operating from is actually incorrect. But if you tell people that, it doesn't matter. They're still just going to believe it because everybody's right in their own mind. So sometimes I'm like, why even talk about logic and critical thinking? Because people just go and believe what they believe, even if what they believe is false. But then the question becomes, is believing something that's false, if you ain't hurting nobody, is it a big deal? Like if you believe that the word picnic, came from, slavery or something, okay. I mean, it didn't, but is that going to hurt anybody? Okay, do you use the word barbecue? Fine. Use the word cookout, whatever.
Is that why they say we don't use that word because
Yes,
it comes from slavery?
because they were picking
All
a
right.
new,
Mm.
and but I never heard that. Like I said, I was in my 30s. Well, because I heard
You
it.
had to be in your 20s when you heard that,
I
bro.
heard it when I was going to a certain church. I'll say that. So I was
Mm-hmm.
actually like in my late 20s, probably.
Okay.
Um, but I'd never heard it before, ever. So all of a sudden, I was like, well, I don't know. Let me look this up because here's the thing about living in the after the 9/9 in the 2000s. Most things out there you can find the data for, but I also find that most people don't actually know how to look things up. They look things up with a bias, meaning they look up the thing already looking it up in the direction of what they believe. So rather than looking it up with an open-ended question, they look it up like with the flat earth. They'll look it up like Why is the earth flat? And that'll be what they look up. And the only thing it's going to give you if you look up why the earth is flat is people who have said the earth is flat. No different than if you look up why is the earth round. The only thing it's going to give you is the things that tell you why the earth is that way because that's what you asked it. Right? Because these days nobody does research. They just look up other people that did research. They don't actually do their own research because they don't have no money. But anyway, so that's where we're starting with. That's your example. Is flat Earth is your example of that. And from their perspective, again, if your feet on the ground, yeah, it may as well be.
All right. Critical thinking.
So like with that, here's an example of how people don't think critically about that. One of the things that they will say is, how are we on a spinning globe that's spinning at 1,000 miles per hour and we don't fall off? Not realizing that the 1,000 miles an hour has nothing to do with nothing. It's how are we on something that spins once per day? Because if you look at something that spins, anything that's round that spins once per day, for its size, it is actually spinning slowly. Spin a basketball one time per day and see how easy it is for stuff to stick to it. Spin a baseball once per day and see once per 24 hours, rotate it at that speed, and you'll actually see how slow it is compared to what you think 1,000 miles an hour. You're thinking a jet. Like, how can you hold on to a jet? It ain't the same thing. You are spinning a massive object once per day. But that's critical thinking. Go ahead, Zoe. I see you leaning towards your mic over there.
You dropping them breakfast bars out here for those folks, man. That's listening early.
But that's why I say, but Henry Ford said that thinking is the hardest work there is. And that's why so few people engage in it. But I find that's the case for a lot of stuff. I just have a lot of time to think because, I grew up as an only child for the first 13 years of my life. So I was always trying to think and evaluate and whatever. But anyway, go ahead, Calvin. I'm sorry. I do apologize.
No. That was, I was asking, and you did it, to give an example of critical thinking, what information you are using so that you can critically think about the subject. But a lot of people, like you said, don't use that. Don't. I see it in the workplace. That's I thought you were going to use.
Yep. Well,
Oh,
I do IT. It's hard not to be logical there because we got standards. We got actual standards and you can't really mess with those. That kind of push you in directions. There's not a lot of ambiguity in the IT space.
There's a whole lot of ambiguity in the aviation space.
Oh, I know it.
talk about it.
No,
No.
nope. Because these people have a tendency to listen to you and not say nothing to you until they want to fire you.
I mean, listen, I can remember at various points in my career bringing the what I call the calibrated torque wrench, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh Lord.
Like, you know what? Yep, that's 12 inch pounds. That's 14 inch pounds. Good.
So what are some ways you could not fall victim to inaccurate information?
Well, like some of the ways are, first you got to always believe that you can't trust anybody's information the first time you see it. Because I don't care what somebody says, I'm gonna be like, oh okay.
My God. That just reminds me. I'm sorry to cut you off. That reminds me of all the non-critical thinking folks out here that's saying the most outrageous things on these social media, or not even social media, but media platforms, bro. It's ridiculous. That's all I got.
So, but and listen, and even here's the thing: the outrageous thing might be true, but I don't just believe something because I want to believe it. I got to go to work and prove that it is or isn't true. And I think a lot of people, I don't think a lot of people want to do that. Because the problem is once you start questioning anything, you start questioning everything. And a lot of people are not willing. They're very unwilling to question everything. They're only willing to question certain things. But that's like, well, either it's logic and critical thinking or it ain't. And if it's not, that's fine. But don't necessarily say that you think logically and critically if then you are not going to think logically and critically about, like, I think logically and critically except over here, but this is why. Fine. If you have a reason, as long as you had a reason, okay, do whatever you want to do. Because maybe you'll say I need to believe these things or I'll go kill 12 people. Fine, great.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whatever. Whatever. Hey, if that's what you need to do, by all means, believe whatever that is, believe that. Please, because I don't need to be on the list. But in
Hmm.
terms of not falling victim to inaccurate information, the first thing is you gotta actually actively question the information that you get that you're being given. Because what I find all the time is, especially if you're on like in social spaces, like social media spaces specifically, people will not necessarily give you all the information.
Right.
They'll give you the parts that are most digestible and either leave out information or then once they've earned your trust, then they will throw in additional information that may or may not be true. It reminds me that so back in the day there was a well, even today there was a I don't know if he was a pastor at the time, a guy named G. Craig Lewis,
Craig Lewis.
and he
Mr.
was
Craig Lewis.
essentially talking about the I'm gonna make a word up. It might not be made up though. The demonicity.
Whoa,
Be making give me
whoa.
making my own dictionary here.
All
But he
right.
was talking about why hip hop music was demonic. Now, I'm not
Oh,
saying it is or it isn't, but one of the things he said, and this was when I was in my 20s. One of the things he
I'm about to
said
say,
was
how old
that
was that?
he still does it. He's been
still
he's
does.
been doing it for at least 20 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things he said was that it was antithetical or it was against God because hip hop was a religion. Now this was before you could Google everything, so I really had to just because I was like, okay, well, what? Because I'd never heard anybody say that hip hop was a religion. So then I went and looked it up, and sure enough, somebody had registered hip hop as a religion. But then here's what else I found out: you can register anything you want to as a religion, and you don't have to have. There's no standards for what's registered locally as a religious organization. So if I wanted to, I could have the Church of Allen registered as a religion in the city I live in.
Amen.
So, which means, I'm not saying he did, which means he could have gone down to the courthouse and registered as a religion just so he could talk about it.
That's true.
I'm not
But
saying he
but
did.
here go. But again, like you said, so you got to evaluate the information. Where the
You got to
information
evaluate
come
the
from?
information.
Where the information come from? And then if it is a so-called religion, who started it?
Well, and that would be the question, right? Because and now that's not to say that there are not people in the hip hop community that don't view hip hop as a religion.
Correct.
Because there certainly are.
Who?
But that, huh?
You say what?
What?
You said people doing what now? They saying what?
People there are people that view hip hop as a religion. Like hip hop, the music art form is is part of a larger religion. It's how some people that are in hip hop view it, right?
So we talking about God MCs? I mean, what are we talking about?
No,
No,
they
no.
actually view it because a religion is just a standardized set of practices for living life, really.
I'm being
And they just view
facetious.
hip hop as teaching that.
Got you. Okay.
I mean, one of the biggest prevent. Now, I don't know that he would consider it. I mean, he like Africa Mabata did say the religion of hip hop, and
He
so did
jumped on the
KRS
train.
One.
Yeah.
KRS One said the religion of hip hop. So, but what are the tenets of that religion? And you'll find a lot of people that believe that are also a part of the 5% nation of gods and earths. So that's you'll find that most of them are 5%ers a lot of the time, which is another religion in and of itself. So that's all I'm saying is you got to evaluate, you got to actively question the information. Then you got to consider that there are multiple perspectives, because nobody nobody views information the same way, right? Because somebody could hear that hip hop is a religion and immediately to themselves be like, oh, well, I'm not listening to rap music ever again. Okay. Then that's fine. If that's what you do. Your life is your life. Your life is yours. Then you got to evaluate the arguments for logical consistency, because what you'll find a lot of times is there isn't consistency to the argument the person is making. Meaning they will, for the thing that they believe, they will put one set of standards on, but for the thing they don't want to believe, they put a different set of standards on that, even though those might be very similar things. You got to be skeptical. Not saying you got to be so skeptical to the point that you're not usable in society, but you got to have some skepticism about what people are telling you, and then you got to trust but verify. That's one of my favorite ones. Like, oh, okay, because like I'm not gonna lie. If Calvin or Zoe tells me something, I'm probably gonna trust it, but I'm still gonna go like, okay, well, let me go look this up anyway.
Trust but
I know you
verify.
said it. I know you said it, and I trust you. But let me go look this up just to make sure.
And
And
that's
then
not
you
a
just got to
wrong thing to
evaluate your,
do.
huh?
That's not a wrong thing to do.
It's not. It's not. Because here's the thing, and Jim Rohn said it. It's possible to be sincere and sincerely wrong.
Yeah.
So I mean, because even I try to make sure that the stuff I share to other people is accurate, or is I try to make sure I verify its validity before I even share it. But then I still encourage everybody, like if I'm sharing anything, go and re-verify its validity, because you might find something I wasn't able to find. So, and then you got to evaluate the source that it's coming from, because one thing I know for sure is liars lie. That's what they do. Liars lie.
Premises. Identify premises.
Yeah, I mean the premise really is just the underlying truth that you're operating out of. Because you could also call it in some cases a bias, because some people will have a bias already in their way of thinking, and that bias will then influence what information they receive.
Choices. Yeah.
So back to the flat Earth thing, because this just happened, right? So one of the things that is um, not believed in the flat Earth community is the 24-hour sun in Antarctica, because during the Antarctic summer, which is still below freezing, but in the Antarctic summer, the sun does not set at all. Like, it doesn't get anywhere near touching the ground. It really is a 24-hour sun that just rotates around you if you're in Antarctica. Like, you literally see it just rotate around the sky if you're in Antarctica. It's the only place you'll see it, because everywhere else the sun would set. And so, but they don't believe that that's possible, because it doesn't fit their narrative of how the Earth is flat, especially if Antarctica doesn't exist and it's just an ice wall. Because how could you have, if it's an ice wall around the edge of the flat Earth, how could you have the sun not set if it's also light on the other side of the world? Like, if it's light in China, like morning in China, there will be no way on a flat Earth that you would still have light in Antarctica. Is what is, because China would be too far north. But then somebody did an experiment. They actually took a flat earther down to Antarctica, paid for everything, and they stood and had a 24-hour camera. They had a camera that followed the sun for 24 hours, and it followed the sun around in a circle. And a lot of people inside the flat earth community are like, well, that doesn't matter. Like, oh, okay.
It's still
All right
flat.
then, bro. Yep.
Y'all move the sun around in one spot.
Hey, you got to move the goalpost, man, at all
It,
times. If something comes
it's a
up and it's
computer
like, oh,
screen.
yep,
It's a computer
yep,
screen. You
computer
got me in a
generated.
dome. You got me in a dome. Okay. All right.
But the thing is, a lot of them are using biblical texts to reinforce their belief in the flat Earth.
No, they're not.
They, I'm not saying they're using it correctly. I'm just saying that's what they're doing. They are using the biblical text to reinforce their belief in a flat Earth.
But they don't believe nothing else in the Bible. Interesting.
But how
No,
you know?
some of them
What you
do.
mean?
Hey, some of them do.
They make it work.
Let's make it work.
They
That's
make
right.
it
We
work.
make it work.
Hey, that's what you do. You
We
make it
make it
work.
do what it do. We make it work.
But that's what, in some cases, depending on what the thing is, that's what you have to do a lot of the time in order to believe what it is you want to believe already. Like there's some stuff that is very, very difficult to believe unless you just force yourself to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is, that's fine. As long as you forcing yourself to believe it doesn't allow you to create public policy, believe what you want to believe. But once you start making public policy, meaning policy that will affect other people, now, we got to deal in truth and fact. And the truth is, they have figured out that the earth was a sphere more than 2,000 years ago. Like, it's not like when people say, "Oh, everybody thought the earth was flat." No. Europeans thought the earth was flat. Everybody else had figured this out already. And it wasn't even all the Europeans. I mean, because the Europeans that didn't have no money, the problem we have, I think, is for a very long time in human history, if you did not have money, you could not get educated. You really were not able to be educated if you did not have, because you couldn't pay for a teacher. There wasn't like established schools. You had to pay for someone that was smart to come and instruct your children. And unless you were an aristocracy or close, you wouldn't have had the finances to do it. That you were just trying to figure out, how am I going to eat tomorrow? How are we going to eat this week? And so education wasn't an important thing in the ancient world in a lot of places. I'm not saying that's true for everywhere, because obviously we have one of the oldest colleges on the planet that's in Timbuktu in Africa, and we also had the library in Alexandria. So it's not to say that education wasn't there, but if you did not have the means to go to those places, how were you getting that education? How are you going to learn? Which, hey, if they get rid of the Department of Education, we might be back there. Can't hear you, Zoe. What'd you say? Still can't hear you. I don't know what's going on with your mic. I can't hear nothing.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
there you go.
That's on me. I was like, this dude. We almost made it a whole podcast without mentioning one of somebody's policies. I'm not gonna say his name,
He who shall not be named.
but it is what it is.
Well, I mean, what you can say after yesterday is we will have the very first president that is a convicted felon and sentenced as such.
Yo, winning.
Hey,
Hashtag
man,
winning.
we gotta be winning.
Hey man, making dreams come true out here. In
Yep.
these streets,
Now we need to go
Shout
ahead
out
and
to America.
remove that from applications. You should not be able to ask the people if felons or not. But anyway,
Across the board.
so that's what when we say identifying a
Let's
premise,
let's
like
let's start some reform out here, y'all.
we could
All right, I'm
go
sorry,
ahead
I'm
and
done.
start a petition. So the premise is that underlying basic truth that you're operating from. So if you're operating from that information can cause you to skew what you believe to be true. If you're operating from a certain premise, like if you're operating from the premise, that the Earth is flat, then you are going to try to prove that premise instead of operating from the premise that I don't know if it is or isn't. I am trying to find out, which is a position of openness in your line of thinking. But most people don't operate from any sort of position of openness in their line of thinking. Hence, the reason why you can give somebody new information that they didn't have before, and they just reject it and continue to believe what they've always believed. right? So it's one of those things where it's like, so what? There's not a lot you can do in those situations if you're trying to say, well, yeah, I know that's what you've believed for the last 20 years or the last 30 years, but here's new information, and they're still just like, yeah, whatever, I'm gonna believe it anyway. All right, okay, well, that's why they say, you can't argue with fools because then you can't tell the difference. And I'm not saying, for the listeners out there, I'm not saying you a fool,
Facts.
but you might be. It's a very thin line,
You might be.
but it's a very thin line where you step over into the, you know, where you step over into the realm of fool. And everybody can cross it at any time.
Tendencies.
They can cross it. I mean, I might be a fool about some stuff. Or maybe a court jester be a better acronym. Go ahead.
So with all that being said, like at this point, it sounds like a person would have to take time to learn these things that they're lacking, and it sounds like it takes a lot of mental energy, and it sounds like someone will have to put effort, is what I'm trying to say, into doing and applying critical thinking versus just seeing facts or seeing information that's new to what they may not have ever heard before. So instead of rejecting it, it would take effort and energy to actually think about what they're receiving and possibly change their perspective on things, even if it's for educational purposes, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So we just lazy out here in these
Yeah.
streets. The critical
Yeah.
thinking, I think, in a lot of, I don't want to say the younger generation because it make me sound like an old dude, but I am an old dude, and I'm gonna just say that there's a lot of things the younger generations are not getting because of the critical thinking is not there.
I,
They want people to think for them
I won't even say the
sometimes, and
younger
I'm like,
generation
yo,
because
figure it out.
who created this mess?
That is true.
I mean, because it's not like so what the baby boomer generation did was they using their version of critical thinking or their perceived version of critical thinking, they put policies and things in place in at least in our country that made the country worse for their children.
Hmm.
And then those people, my generation, did the same thing because every generation has wanted it to be easier and easier. Um, and every generation has been more. It's almost like they've been more and more influenced by what is seen as whatever the ruling class is at the time, until there's kind of a violent snapback, and only because like people um revered people like Henry Ford, Andrew Carnegie, for no reason really other than that they had wealth. But Henry Ford is the one that created the 40-hour work week. It didn't exist in the U.S. at least before he created it because he needed people to be able to work in the factories, and he needed them to work in shifts so that the factories could produce at a reliable pace.
Hmm.
So, but I don't. But the question is the 40-hour work week a good thing? There's research to indicate that a 40-hour work week is not really conducive to how humans operate. Which I find, most people find to work anyway, because most people go to work and they probably do 4 hours of actual work for the whole 8 hours they're there.
When did you say that was? What era was that? What time
Henry
frame was
Ford
that? You said.
was early 1900s, late 18s, early
Got it.
1900s.
So they've been force feeding it for that long. I love it.
Oh, no, they've been force feeding it. If you want to be honest, since we got here, because the people that have always had the most power were the people with the most money.
Gotcha.
I mean, because if you think about the people that were on the Declaration of Independence, there weren't no poor people on that. There weren't no poor people signatures on there. Not one. Not one poor person was on the Declaration of Independence. They was all at least upper middle class and above,
And owners.
and owners of people. and land. But we like to pretend that these people that were the framers of the Constitution and framers of the Declaration of Independence were regular folks. Nah, well, none of them regular. Because if you were regular, you couldn't get a seat at the table. But if you're not thinking critically about that, you just like, oh yeah, George Washington was just a regular guy. He owned 200 people. How is that regular? Like 200 is a lot. Like that makes you very wealthy. But he was the first president. And I'm not saying that he didn't have some good ideas, but let's not pretend that he was a saint and that he didn't have an agenda, right?
Don't they all have agendas,
Everybody got
bro?
an agenda. And usually it's whatever
That's
agenda
true.
advances themselves. I find that the very few people think of the common good and most people think of what's good for me. And I'm a do what's good for me. Like I'm one of those people that even as a business owner, I wish they would close a lot of the tax loopholes. Because if they did, the federal government could generate much more tax revenue and even though I'm sure it won't, it'll probably go to the US military. But they could institute a lot more social programs. Because I'm one of the people that think that the more we press into technology, the more people are going to be left on the outside, having to use those social programs to just live. Because we can say what we want, but if we're saying that we're going to, and this is where again critical thinking comes in. If we're trying to say that we have all of these tech jobs available, but then we're going to get rid of standards from a federal standpoint of education, then who getting them tech
Mm.
jobs? Only the people that have the money to
Well,
send their kids to the schools.
that goes back to the old times.
So
Same
yeah,
thing.
but
Repeat.
that's what they want. But if you can't think critically, if you can't see if you can't think critically, you have a hard time seeing how the web comes together, right?
So would that so it'd be safe to say that the people who lack critical thinking can't see the bigger picture.
Generally speaking, because they're like, well, because one of the other things that they will assume, that people will assume, I won't say they, but what the people will assume is that this doesn't affect this over here. Like these two things are not connected. And I'm like, we live in a society; it's all connected, right? You can't do something in one area and not actually affect another area. Now the question is, what is that effect going to be? But I can certainly tell you that now. Now it also is possible that they give a that, like, say for example, to get rid of the Department of Education. Which here's some things that will
Mm-hmm.
happen, no doubt, because the Department of Education is what mandates that schools provide education to everyone, regardless of their socioeconomic background, regardless. So it's the Department of Education is the reason why there is special education in schools of any kind. So somebody, if you have a kid that is on an IEP,
Mm. Talk about it.
that is mandated by the Department of Education. Now, is it possible that your school system will keep those? Maybe, but they won't the federal government is what provides the funding for those. The Department of Education provides the funding for those programs where if you have an IEP or something, they provide that funding to those schools so that those programs can continue to exist. So if the Department of Education goes away, eventually what's going to happen to that IEP, or your local Department of Education is going to have to find another way to raise the money. And the only way they're going to raise the money is by taxing you. Money got to come from somewhere. If they're not going to get it from the federal
It
government, because
does.
I don't know if y'all remember. Y'all remember when there was a governor late late-ish 90s that ran saying he was going to get rid of the personal property tax?
Mm-mm.
Okay, I remember, which also tells you how long I've at least been listening to politics, right? Because I was in high school. Because if you remember, we used to have city stickers, and we used to also have to
Yes.
pay I
Inspection
didn't mean for that thumbs
stickers,
up to be there. But we also had to pay personal
technology.
property. We still pay personal property tax, but the personal property tax technically is paid to the city that you live in.
Mm-hmm.
And what the governor said was he was going to repeal the personal property tax. He was going to do it in a graduated fashion. I mean, they're going to step down. They were going to go from one rate to another rate to another rate to another rate until they got to zero. But what most people didn't hear that he said was that the state was the one that was going to pick that tab up. So he wasn't really getting rid of the tax. The state was now going to pay it to the cities. And my mindset is always, where are you getting that money from?
Did they raise taxes?
Of course they did.
Okay,
But your personal property tax went down. Now you only pay half, and the state pays the other half. They never got to zero because they couldn't afford it. But that's what he ran on, because people were so up in arms about the personal property tax across the state. Because it's not even a state tax; it's a local tax. But people act like it's a state tax. It's a local tax because you pay it to your local municipality. But people were upset about it because you just bought a car, and now you got this $1,500, $2,000 bill, and so people were upset about it. But in any event, he was lying because they never got rid of it.
well, yeah. I mean, he tried, but it didn't work out. Just like somebody else said they were gonna get rid of what did they say they was gonna get rid of? Grocery tax or something
Yes.
like that.
Well, yeah.
And he came and it was like, you know what? That's not a good idea.
Well,
because it didn't make any
I didn't think it
sense.
made any sense anyway. Because you telling me you're gonna get rid of the smallest tax we got?
Got it.
You gonna get rid of this tax? It was like
I'm just saying, in
1.4%.
comparison.
Man, get out of here, bro. That ain't helping. I mean, it's helping some, but if over the course of a year, I might spend $100 in grocery tax. I mean, because if you bought $10,000 in groceries, you're gonna save 1%. If you spend $1,000 in groceries, you're gonna save 1%, which is $10. You saving $10 for every 1,000. But anyway, moving right along.
Get rid of that jump.
Get rid of that jump.
Calvin, you got anything? Hey, matter of
No,
fact,
man.
cue the music.
Let me cue the music.
I'm giving the music.
There you go. There you go. Can you hear the music? There you go.
I need that vibe. Yeah, I need that vibe to close it out.
Yeah, smooth vibes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome.
The music.
Oh, y'all can't hear it? Okay, I can hear it on my end. Here we go. Let me have some more.
I heard a little bit. There
you go.
I can hear a little bit.
Smooth jazz.
Okay, now we in the pocket. We in the pocket. Closing remarks, man. Well, first of all, I'll start very educational. Learn actually a lot of things in regards of these non-critical thinking folks. So I would suggest, or I would hope that people will become greater at solving problems and being great critical thinkers. That's all I got. Nothing.
Calvin said he got nothing. Hey, listen. So here's the thing. In closing, I realize that sometimes when we talk about educational topics, that y'all don't want to hear us be educational. But my thing is just don't be dumb out here, man. And by dumb, I mean dumb. Just don't be that. That's all.
Dumb.
Do your best. Yeah. By dumb, I mean dumb. Hey, do your best to listen. If I run into you this year, my mindset is I should be able to see the change in you next year. That's all. Like I should be able to see that you become better next year. That's that. But maybe that's a flaw in my own logic that people should be getting better. I can't hear you, Calvin. What'd you say? Oh, he's talking to somebody else.
He's talking on the phone.
Yeah, that's how it is when you're important. He just be on the phone. Anyway, so that's all I'm saying. So I know sometimes educational ain't as funny. You know what I'm saying? It ain't as inflammatory, or whatever. It ain't whatever you're looking for. But I'm just saying that
it's good conversation, man. Good conversation.
I understand. I just feel like everybody should be out here trying to be a better version of themselves every day. Don't try to be a better version of somebody else. Just be the better version of you. And over time, you won't even recognize the you that you used to be, because you have transformed into somebody newer, bigger, better, stronger, right? So that's all. That's all. I just want everybody to live their best life, and I just feel like if you can't think critically, it's harder to do. Is how I feel about it. Maybe I'm wrong though. I allow space for me to be wrong about everything. But anyway, hey, we'll see y'all next week, man.
Appreciate y'all. Love y'all. Yeah.